Denver knows it needs a new approach to the unprecedented surge in migrant arrivals.
I've been really proud of how the city has already stepped up, but we're doing it super reactionary, very last minute.
This year's big ballot issue, Prop HH, the tax deal, it's complicated. Maybe that's why both sides are misleading voters. Tonight, we're cutting through those claims. One of Colorado's great ag areas is moving to protect the water that it has left.
People have got their eyeballs on any drop of water anywhere in the state.
And tonight, we're working together to support a group that is very quietly and privately helping women in crisis in our community. That's tonight on Next. Denver's current system to shelter migrants coming from the southern border is not sustainable. The city admits as much. The last administration's plan to back up the Brinks truck for, ironically, an armored truck company, that didn't fly with other city leaders. So our Mark Salinger looks at some other possible approaches.
As the number of migrants arriving in Denver stays at an all-time high, the city still doesn't have a long-term plan for how to handle the stress it's putting on resources.
I've been really proud of how the city has already stepped up, but we're doing it super reactionary, very last minute.
More than 200 migrants are arriving every day recently from the southern border. It's gotten so hectic, City Council now holds emergency meetings on the topic. Denver even asked the state to call in the National Guard to help a couple of weeks ago. That request was denied, but the help is still needed. City Council President Jamie Torres says the city will begin interviewing potential vendors next week for contracts to outsource everything from food to shelter to medical services.
I am grateful that we're actually able to step back, assess this a little bit differently, and work with partners that we know and we trust.
If this sounds familiar, it's because we've already been down this road once this year. The first plan failed. Denver was set to sign a $40 million contract earlier this summer with an international security company called GardaWorld.
We were getting taken for a ride, I think, by GardaWorld. $40 million for what they were proposing was a huge price tag.
GardaWorld went on to sign a $29 million contract with the city of Chicago a couple months later to shelter around double the number of migrants for $11 million less than what they were charging Denver.
And I think it was also probably overreach in hope and anticipation that just one vendor could come in and solve the whole problem.
That hope is gone now. The city now knows one company can't handle everything. They're looking to hire several local nonprofits and community groups to run different parts of the operation.
Break up the work in both scale and depth. And so some of our local nonprofits, some of our local providers, or even statewide providers could potentially be vendors for a piece of that contract.
The city won't be ready to pit the vendors until at least the end of December. As we've been following this story, the biggest question is always, why are so many more migrants arriving right now? The answer the city is giving is that the state of Texas is sending buses from the southern border to Colorado, sometimes nearly a dozen every day. Denver says Texas isn't giving them any heads up on when those buses are coming, or Kyle, how many people might be on board.
And Mark, we've talked about this here before, but it can't be ignored. The overlap between the dual crises the city is facing between the number of folks coming here from the southern border who don't have a place to live, and then the people who have been in our community who don't have a place to live.
And now there is concern among city council members that these new rules that Denver has instituted that keep people in shelters for less amount of time is actually creating some people to be forced to go live on the street. There is concern amongst those city council members whether that is actually contributing to the homelessness problem.
Well, at the very least, this is part of the issue that they have control over. You know, it's not a federal rule. If they want to change that shelter rule, they can change that shelter rule, although they put it in place so they wouldn't get in trouble with the feds. Mark, thank you. So there are some on Denver City Council that also want to bring back a committee that gives city leaders more of a say in what the school district does. You can imagine what DPS thinks of that idea. This joint committee would make policy recommendations on issues like education funding and school safety. It's a model that's already on the books in Denver, but the committee has not been active for years. The city council members swear that they got DPS's input ahead of this announcement, that the mayor is backing as well, but district leaders not feeling it. They were not invited to a public announcement last week where city leaders were openly critical of the school board's now famous dysfunction. Today, DPS said that they want equal representation on this committee, and they don't want to have to go to the meetings if they don't want to. We expect that this will shake out when city council discusses it next month. So it's a good thing that the U.S. and the world don't have any, say, pressing problems that need attention, because the U.S. House still does not have a speaker and therefore can't do anything. Can't pass a bill, can't spend money, can't do whatever. Republican infighting resulted in another failed speaker vote today. Colorado's Ken Buck is leading the opposition to ultra-conservative Jim Jordan. Jordan didn't have the votes yesterday, had even fewer votes today. Republicans voting no on Jordan report receiving harassment, including death threats. That does not seem to be intimidating Congressman Buck, who is a constant anti-Jordan fixture on CNN these days. Buck acknowledged he's interested in a job at CNN. Buck says he wants Jordan to admit the 2020 election was not rigged, but the big lie is awful central to Jim Jordan's appeal to the Trump wing of their party. There are new TV ads airing here and elsewhere in support of Proposition HH. That's the Democrats' plan to take Tabor tax refund money in order to reduce the coming increase in our property taxes. It is almost impressive how they've managed to fit so many false and misleading claims into just a 15-second ad.
No one in Colorado wants a 40% increase in property taxes, but there's only one way to avoid it.
That is false. There is another way. But Democrats have rejected Republican calls for a special legislative session to find a fix for skyrocketing property taxes without raiding Tabor refunds or increasing the size of the state budget.
Prop HH will reduce taxes for everyone while preserving Tabor refunds.
That is misleading on a couple of levels. Prop HH would not reduce taxes below what you pay today. It would reduce the amount of property tax increases in the future. Prop HH is going to cut into taxpayer Bill of Rights refunds with the potential to eliminate those refunds altogether in some years. It would allow the state to collect, keep, and spend billions of dollars more in the next decade if Prop HH passes.
Yes on HH. Property tax relief now.
Prop HH, like Colorado's tax structure, is complex, so any 15-second ad or 1-minute truth test is going to have to simplify things. But there's a way to do it without being as deceptive as Prop HH's supporters are in this ad. When you get your next taxpayer Bill of Rights refund, Tabor refund, it's going to be part of your tax return as it's been in the past. It will not be a special standalone check in the mail. That was a one-time thing that Colorado Democrats decided to do last year, right ahead of the election. A next viewer, Brandon in Lakewood, questioned a mailer that he got. It certainly looked like a Tabor refund in the mail. It was actually political spending by Tabor supporters, the group that's trying to defeat Prop HH. Our Marshall Zellinger takes apart some misleading messages from that side.
Do not be fooled by the fake check from the fake Office of Taxpayers Bill of Rights refunds. It is not from the Colorado Department of Revenue. It is a political mailer from Americans for Prosperity, the national conservative dark money group fighting Proposition HH. Brandon in Lakewood sent us images of the mailer that kinda looks official on first glance. The mailer is an attempt to persuade a no vote on Proposition HH. That's the ballot issue that would reduce the increase in your property tax in return for allowing the state to keep and spend more money each year, which would reduce future Tabor refunds. Is it accurate to say Tabor tax refunds will be zero? No. Is it possible future Tabor refunds will be zero? Yes. If HH passes, the state will be allowed to keep and spend more money than is currently allowed, and that's money that would normally be refunded back to you. HH creates a new cap on what the state can keep before having to refund money back to you. Another part of the mailer makes another claim we need to look at. It says Proposition HH gives local government politicians the ability to raise taxes. This one is trickier to explain. HH limits how much local governments can receive in property tax revenue each year. That limit is the previous year's amount plus inflation. School districts and home rule governments are exempt from that limit. If property tax revenue is more than inflation and the local government wants to keep it, HH requires a public meeting with public comment and then the elected leaders vote, not you. Without HH, that limit does not exist and local governments would not have to hold a meeting and vote. Is that a tax increase? It's possible local governments keep the same amount regardless of if HH passes or not. HH just sets a limit that creates more steps to be taken to keep that money. So is it legal to send a check that looks like a real Tabor refund? No complaints have been filed with the Secretary of State's office yet. There is a state law, though, Kyle, that prohibits false statements to affect a vote on an issue. But as we've seen with so many political ads and mailers, misleading statements does not necessarily mean false statements.
This issue is so complicated, and yet it's so important because it's going to come down to how much money people in this state owe in tax. This is important. I feel like we should have like a debate or something on it. Are you free next Monday at 7 p.m.?
Do you think you're going to get people in time for a debate on Monday at 7 p.m., like the governor, perhaps?
I think we will. We'll also get you a new microphone by then so we can hear you. But yeah, Marshall Zellinger will moderate a debate on Prop HH, the governor versus opponents of it, streaming on 9 News Plus, 7 p.m. on Monday. We will remind you every day between now and then. Marshall, thank you. You know, there's a time when if somebody in your town was facing sudden financial hardship, tons of people would pitch in collectively to help them out. Well, that time is now in the St. Vrain Valley in Weld and Boulder counties. That's why this week's Word of Thanks microgiving campaign supports the nonprofit called A Woman's Work. For 20 years, women in that community have pooled their personal resources to help out neighbors who have an emergency need that can't easily be met elsewhere. Financial support for women's immediate needs that often result from the loss of a job or the death of a spouse, maybe a domestic violence situation, or a really tough health diagnosis. After 2 decades of this work, A Woman's Work has a lightning-fast system for helping. The requests come in from around the community. They're often coming through schools or community groups. Then there's a panel of women who evaluate the request without knowing the name of the person that they're helping, because often it would be a neighbor that they know. It could be money for rent or a car payment or a car repair. Maybe it's a medical bill, and that money can go out within days. $1,000 here, $1,000 there, when that kind of money can be life-changing. Scan the QR code on your screen or text the word THANKS to 303-871-1491 to get that link to donate. We know that even $5 helps. Same as every week, I'll match the first 50 donations of $5 to get us rolling. This is as direct as giving can get. I mean, short of putting the money right in the hand of somebody in need. The need is out there, often from people you would not expect. A Woman's Work quietly and carefully helps a lot of those people in their community.
We're doing our damnedest to try to preserve that resource.
Water is life in the valley. So leaders who don't always agree in this beautiful part of Colorado are working together to protect what is left. And what to do with a now disgraced name that is all over our state, because taking it off a mountain might have been the easy part. The San Luis Valley is drying out. Its counties were told to fill up their aquifer 20 years ago, and today it's at about 1.2 million acre feet. Think a bit more than all the water in Blue Mesa Reservoir. Now, the valley is a step closer to protecting the water they have left. After a plan to pump water from the valley to Douglas County failed, leaders in southern Colorado agreed that they would work together to fend off future water grabs. All 6 counties there, Alamosa, Saguache, Castilla, Conejo, Mineral, and Rio Grande, along with 17 towns and cities, have signed on to this agreement that would give them more of a say in when and how water leaves the valley. Proposals to export water would be reviewed by a planning board of local leaders. One of those board members told us this is an unprecedented step for collaboration.
We've never had the ability to work together across jurisdictions. I mean, we have this vast aquifer that's 120 miles long by 60 miles wide. And we draw these political boundaries across it. But what we do up here affects them down there and vice versa. And so it's just a great opportunity to collaborate on issues that affect us all.
The agreement could open doors for collaboration on all kinds of different issues other than water, perhaps affordable housing. But first, the member jurisdictions have to approve the rules, and that could happen by the end of this year. I mean, Danielle Grant, water is life down there. I mean, you got an area the size of Massachusetts with a shared aquifer, so everybody's kind of drinking out of the same straw. So if somebody at one end decides that they're going to take a long drink and send it up to Douglas County or someplace else, that's affecting all the farmers and ranchers up and down the valley.
Yeah, absolutely. And nice to see them trying to work together to figure it all out. You know, we have not seen much in the way of water, free water around here throughout the month of October. Typically today, October 18th, is when we see the first snowfall here in Denver. Not the case this year as we have bright blue skies out there, sun beginning to set off in the distance. Temperatures temperatures this afternoon. A little cooler than where we were at yesterday, that's for sure, but it felt nice in the lower 70s out at DIA, 70s across the plains, 60s and 70s up in the mountains. That cold front that helped to cool us off, it's now long gone, impacting the Midwest, bringing them some scattered showers, but you can see it was a dry front for us, and that's really what we're looking at over the course of the next couple of days. Warm, dry conditions, all courtesy of this ridge that's starting to build back into Colorado. We had that brief little lull, and now it's back. Temperatures tomorrow soaring into the upper 70s, low 80s for the urban corridor, off to the eastern plains, 50s, and even mid to upper 60s for some areas in the high country. Check out the 7-day forecast. If you like the summer heat, it's back in full force. In fact, we're going to be close to that record high. Still stands at 83. We'll see what we can do on Friday. Little front zips in for the weekend. That'll knock down our temperatures by only a couple of degrees. We stay dry. Right now, the next chance for seeing a little rain around here is going to be next Tuesday, but right now, no snow in sight.
The whole series of Mount Evans names needs to be changed, actually.
The tribes that helped take Evans off the mount are looking beyond just that one name change. Colorado's indigenous leaders spent more than a year lobbying for Mount Evans to become Mount Blue Sky. That name change, approved last month, renamed the peak and nothing else. Clear Creek County is still covered in references to the governor who authorized the Sand Creek Massacre in the 1800s. The Mount Evans Scenic Byway, the Mount Evans Trout Fishing Pond, there's the Mount Evans Exit off I-70, the Mount Evans State Wildlife Area. It goes on. And these are names decided by all types of different jurisdictions. CDOT says it's working on changing its signs. Colorado's Democratic governors introduced a bill yesterday to rename the federal wilderness area around Mount Blue Sky. We talked with the governor of the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes, who says he will consider this name change effort a success only at the point that all these loose ends have been tied up.
That would mean it would have been 100% successful in that regard, to having the names changed from anything Evans to Mount Blue Sky Wilderness Area, all those Blue Sky Road, all those things that are associated with John Evans needs to be changed. Because his memory shouldn't be there. We shouldn't honor him for his massacre, his efforts to massacre the Cheyenne Arapaho people.
You will be shocked to hear that this process slows to a crawl when the federal government gets involved. For instance, the Forest Service estimates that changing their signs alone could take until the year 2025. We will be back in just a moment with your feedback. As always, this is a construction site. Be very careful. 170 plus weeks into your Word of Thanks generosity, some of the causes that you have supported are pretty complicated operations. The nonprofit A Woman's Work is not, but what they do for their community is hugely impactful. They pay for the emergency needs of women in Boulder and Weld counties. Money gets out the door quickly when a woman gets a devastating health diagnosis or loses a spouse, gets laid off from a job, or needs to escape a domestic violence situation. Scan the QR code on your screen or text the word THANKS to 303-871-1491 to join me in donating to support A Woman's Work. This is direct help for neighbors in need. Their group of women evaluates requests for help that come in from the community. No names attached, so there's no stigma. Often these are folks who know each other, and they rapidly get relatively small amounts of money out the door to help when that money can make a huge difference. A text that came in about the idea of renaming everything associated with former Governor John Evans. Hey, Kyle, I would love to change my address to Blue Sky, Colorado from Evans, Colorado. Boy, if that discussion ever starts up about renaming the entire town of Evans, wouldn't that be interesting? And John says, why can't we send the migrants back to Texas? Because, John, cruelty is not the point, or rather, it should not be the point. I'll see you next time.